Hi, everybody. This is Addison Shonland. It is the 28th of October, and I have two guests today from MHIRJ on the left, Ross Mitchell, the ever famous Ross Mitchell.
Hello, Addison.
And Elio Ruggi.
Ruggi.
I beg your pardon. My Italian is not so great.
The less famous of the two.
Well, listen, we can make you a YouTube sensation today.
Great to speak to you today, Addison.
Thank you very much for visiting with me in a virtual sense. So, of course, the big news, and indeed any news from MHIRJ is exciting. There's this news about a deal with ZeroAvia. Could you give us some idea of the scope of what that deal is, please?
Sure. So I guess first off, it's a memorandum of understanding. So we're hoping to come to an agreement with them. And it's really about MHIRJ using its Aerospace Engineering Center, which Elio runs, to help ZeroAvia certify the technology that we're working on today. So it's really using the expertise we have at MHIRJ that was developed over a number of years in the CRJ program to help an industry startup to develop new technology, promising technology in the green space.
Now, does that mean that you will be helping them with the Dornier project, the Alaska Airlines project, or you guys onto something different?
Well, essentially, Addison, the strategy is for us to really focus on the engine itself. So what we bring to the table is this aircraft level expertise. And so there's a fantastic synergy that we're putting together with ZeroAvia to really help them develop the core technology, which is the engine itself, a little bit agnostic of the application and really, primarily focused on the engine itself as a technology.
So what you guys are going to be doing, if the MOU is executed to its extent, you'll be touching all the ZeroAvia commercial applications that they're working on.
That's correct. If you look at, ZeroAvia primarily is focusing on becoming an engine manufacturer. So the platform itself is of course important, but the first focus is really developing the product, the engine itself, that can then be considered for the different applications and spaces.
Okay. And of course, hydrogen is the flavor of the week, along with SAF. It seems to me, I was at the IATA conference in Boston a few weeks ago, and this sustainability umbrella that this all fits under felt a lot to me like virtue signaling. Everybody's promising that they're going to be green, and all the people doing the promising are, I don't want to say senior citizens, but senior people who will not be around, either alive or most definitely will not be working to have to deliver on the promise of 2050. Any thoughts on that you would say that you could share that is going to be obviously?
Well, I think, we can't comment on what other people are doing, of course. But I think what we're doing here is we're trying to use our expertise to help someone that's new to the industry to try and certify this new and exciting technology. We're making no promises. That's not what we're about in this particular case. We're really trying to leverage our expertise to help someone who is trying to develop a solution that will be greener. And I know there are a lot of projects out there, but this is one we feel confident in and that we've started to work with. And certainly we think that we can now use the expertise we have to really move this project forward in cooperation with ZeroAvia.
Yeah, definitely, Ross. In fact, Addison, every technology that's mainstream today has been at this stage in its life cycle. There was a time when the technology was, as you just summarized it, full of speculation, full of hope, full of, questioning in terms of, is it going to become a reality, or is this just, something that's going to fade away? What we've seen in ZeroAvia is, the right approach, the right strategy, the right framework. And we believe that, collaborating with them is going to, point us in the right direction and give us the best chance of success.
I think, Addison, one of the things I would say on the green technology is it's probably relatively easy to sit on the sidelines and poke holes in things, but this is something we have to do. It's clear that aviation needs to move to a more sustainable place. And so, we're happy to be able to contribute to the success of an innovator. And like I said, we're making no promises, but I think it is the sort of thing that companies like MHIRJ can contribute to the overall efforts to move us to a more sustainable future.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, our president has said, we want to remain part of this ecosystem, and we want to contribute to it in a green way in the future. So these are all steps in the right direction, and continuing to focus on this type of technology will one day realize it and make it part of our mainstay.
Right. Well, Ross, as you know, my job is to poke at things.
I do know that, and I appreciate it's your job.
Okay, so do you have any kind of timeline you can share with us on the project?
Well, the timeline is actually ZeroAvia's. They've published various milestone that they want to achieve in terms of technology, also related to power densities that they're pursuing. So we're really dovetailing into their timeline. In terms of our activities, we'd like to get them started as soon as possible and really contribute to their pace and roadmap.
The engine that is being designed, would it be a turbofan or a turboprop? I beg your pardon.
I'm wondering if ZeroAvia has made that public or not. So I'm going to reserve my comment because I can't remember if they've made that public or not. What we can tell you is that they have the intention to scale, to be able to provide for the smaller Dornier type product, and eventually to make their way into the regional and commercial space.
Right. So yesterday's news, for example, that they were putting out a roughly 5,000 horsepower turboprop for the Dash 8, which both of you would probably be very familiar with. And of course, we've seen Airbus show pictures of turbofan powered hydrogen airplanes, I would imagine way beyond 2030. So, okay, if you can't give me that.
Well, maybe Addison, what I can say is definitely, we see that the fundamentals of the architecture that ZeroAvia is pursuing, would definitely have applications in a turbofan configuration.
That's great. That's a good one. I
tiptoed around that one, didn't I?
Well, yeah, you danced well then, Mr. Ruji. Okay, so let's talk about, well, look, if we know that they could, the ZeroAvia technology thinks up to 5,000 horsepower in prop version, obviously you need more than that power for a regional jet. Now there's talk here about a regional jet and getting into the regional business. Obviously we have to think about this because, as we know from the Alaska story, they're taking an 1,100 nautical mile range airplane down to 500 miles by taking off one motor, fossil fuel burning motor, SAF or fossil fuel burning motor, and putting on an electric hydrogen electric hybrid thing. That loses a lot of range. What can one expect if they were to look at a regional jet? I guess that's also something you guys know a bit about.
Sure. Definitely the challenge with a technology like hydrogen is twofold. First, you need to make the basic principles work. You need to be able to extract, power from a configuration. And then the next big obstacle becomes scalability. So, making, an engine like this work on a bench is one thing. Being able to scale it, for the purposes of industrialization and what the different industries require is a secondary challenge. And our goal is to support them in achieving both. So the regional space, we believe, is within the range of, what this technology can output over time. Is it going to be available, in the first go? Maybe, or as we've seen with other technologies, it becomes available, in stepping stones of power densities. And so what you've heard, for example, in the example of Alaska, is a stepped approach, to be able to bring the technology to market with limitations and then continue to grow and evolve it over time. So all of those options are available. You can decide to wait, till you get to a minimum threshold. The business viability is also going to be an important factor of deciding when the technology is mature enough, to apply to a regional jet market. You can decide to go in a little bit earlier with less performance, less range, or wait a bit longer and until you achieve a minimum number that makes the business case work.
The hydrogen fuel that is going to power this motor, I presume, will be stored in liquid form?
Well, these are aspects of the configuration that need to be finalized. There's advantages and disadvantages to both. Of course, if you transport it in the gas phase, then you need a lot more space and volume to carry it. If you transport it in the liquid phase, well, then it requires a bit more specific technology to be able to keep it at the higher pressures that are required. So the perfect installation is part of what needs to be unlocked to finalize the scalability that we spoke about earlier.
Do you have any sense of if, for example, 500 liters of fossil fuel or SAF takes up a certain volume, let's just pick a number, what of that same volume of liquid hydrogen, would it require the same amount of space, or would it require less or more?
There's definitely a ratio that's applied, but probably the better way to look at it is to look at the real estate that the traditional combustion engine requires in terms of installations. And when you subtract everything that's required to make traditional combustion engine work, it actually frees up a lot more real estate than you would have imagined. And so even though the volume of hydrogen typically is bigger for the corresponding amount of kerosene, the installation and all of the plumbing, if you will, and the additional features that are required for today's current configurations are able to create additional real estate to house the hydrogen requirements.
That's an intriguing aspect. Can you give me an example of what you would take off?
Yes. Well, you can imagine, for example, using your center tanks, your wing tanks. You can imagine using areas like your APU bay, in a hydrogen setup where now you're converting hydrogen to electricity. The requirement of the APU can also be considered to be replaced by the electrical power being generated by the engine. So it's those spaces that get repurposed and are going to be looked at to make up the additional space required by hydrogen.
Now, you guys obviously were formerly making tail-engined regional jets. What do you think hydrogen would do as a retrofit to regional jets? I mean, how much longer can you make that airframe viable before you switch to something completely different?
Well, the CRJ airframe, is a very robust airframe. We've seen exciting things. We've seen operators really take advantage of the life cycles that are available in the hull. Today, we haven't seen any operator use the full life of the hull yet. So there's there's an available space or margin in the structural life of these aircrafts that can be available. And then, of course, there's always the ability to go beyond if we have to. We've done that in the past on different products. So it is something that's achievable. But in general, we feel that the products in the regional space could be adapted nicely to a hydrogen technology retrofit. These are ideas that of course everybody has in the back of their mind, and everyone wants to consider in the future. Right.
So it sounds like a really exciting project. Ross, I couldn't let you off the hook. I have a question for the lawyer in you.
Okay.
Can we talk about IP?
IP?
Yeah.
I don't know that I'm the right person to answer it, but you can ask the question.
So there's obviously going to be all kinds of juicy IP that's going to come out of this project. Who owns what?
Well, I think Addison, you know, the lawyer in me is going to answer that question and say those things are to be determined and not for us to share on channels at this point in time. So I think my answer to that question will be you have to stay tuned and find out on that. But right now we can't divulge any of that to you.
All right, then. Okay, let's go to less thin ice. I think speaking to Canadians, after all, it's snowing where you guys are already, right?
Not quite.
Not quite. Okay, so if we can talk about IP, when does this MOU firm up into something, and everybody starts to work?
Well, I think, Addison, you know, the parties will continue to talk and we'll look to firm it up in the near term. I can't give you a date. We don't have a date as to when it firms up. We have to deal with a lot of details and we'll get there. And we just wanted to signal with ZeroAvia that we are working on this now and the firm agreement should come shortly.
All right. I guess that'll have to do.
All right. Well, thanks for the time today, Addison.
Thank you so much, gents.
Thank you, Addison.
All right. Take care.
Have a good day.